This is the Coach Bru Show. This is also the world's shortest podcast intro.
Welcome, everybody, to the Coach Bru podcast. You are listening to I, the Almighty, your fearless leader, Coach Bru, and we are joined by a very special guest today, who is kind of like parallel universes, I guess you could say. Very similar to the other guest I had on the show, Ed Molitor. This guest is Jamy Bechler, a former college coach like Ed and yours truly, who is now embarked on a very successful career as a speaker, professional speaker, coach, and author. He kind of has taken the back roads of college coaching, much like myself, which is why we're kindred spirits. And there are a lot of parallels to leadership in business and sports that we both are very like-minded on. And that's also why I wanted to have him on the podcast. He is a super successful podcast himself called Success is a Choice. And we're going to jump into talking about that. We'll talk about his website, which is jamybechler.com, which you should go there. You should subscribe to his newsletter. He's as great a podcaster as he is. He's just as great with the written word. And he's released a fabulous new book that I have right here. It's called, oh, wait, that's mine. Never mind. Hold on.
That is a heck of a book right there.
Yeah, it's called The Bus Trip. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that book. And then also this book, Building Champions, Success Principles from A to Z, is the other element of the Coach Bechler library, which I have. I think for everyone listening, your personal library is incomplete without those books. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So here I am, shamelessly promoting.
Well, you only show two, right?
I only show two. The Leadership Playbook. I gave my copy to someone and they never returned it. So we can talk about that too.
You were wanting to show this one only because right there on the back.
Let me read the endorsement.
Right there, John Brubaker. That's why you wanted to show that one.
I endorsed this book, Building Champions, Success Principles from A to Z. And here's what I had to say about it. I don't remember what I said, so I'm going to have to look it up here and read it. Warning, contents contain ingredients which lead to success. Do not purchase this book.
Mission accomplished.
Just a dramatic pause, folks. Let me finish the sentence. Do not purchase this book if allergic to trophies, plaques, or championship rings. If that isn't the best freaking endorsement for a coach or an athlete to buy a book, I don't know what is.
Yeah, in fact, I've used that endorsement in every book that I've endorsed since then. I just figured that was just great. I might as well just steal that.
We don't call him cut and paste Bechler for nothing, folks.
We don't. No, my English. How did you know? Did you talk to my English teacher about that?
A little Snopes.com. So Jamy is he's an original. He's a one of a kind. We just joke around about the R&D, which we agree most people in our business refer to as rip off and duplicate, not research and development. But Jamy's one of a kind. He views the world of sports through a very unique lens, the world of leadership through a unique lens, which is why I wanted to have him on the podcast. He's got a great academic and athletic background at a variety of levels. I think success leaves clues. It's also a choice from what I hear, but it also leaves clues. And I just wanted to kind of unpack a little bit about, his unique lens and his unique philosophy on leadership, and just to help you guys learn a little bit more about his career and his philosophy, and how that's yielded some fabulous results for him. So, Jamy, welcome to the Coach Bru podcast.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan. I don't subscribe to every podcast out there, but when I do subscribe and when I do listen, I listen to the Coach Bru Show. So I'm honored to be on the show.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Jamy, let's get a little bit about your backstory. As you kind of progressed from, college to career. I love to start there with people because it's amazing. One of the common denominators is there's so many people who never work in the field that they majored in, or, aren't involved in an industry that they studied in college. And I just love to hear like a little bit about the journey and, how people make a choice to go down one path versus the other, or, choose to, after a period of time, embark on just a completely new journey. I know I've done that and you've done that, and that's why we are kindred spirits and get along so well. So take us back to the beginning.
Yeah, well, I was a good athlete and I was a bad athlete growing up, and I was a good coach and I was a bad coach throughout my career. So I kind of experienced it all in a way, which has kind of helped me, I think, become a better leadership consultant or a better speaker, or when I work with teams, I'm able to maybe see more sides than just somebody that, wrote a book because they've won championships and all they've ever done is win. They don't, or, a star player who they've only been a star. They don't know what it's like to be on the end of the bench, with the trainer in the water cooler as your two best friends. Yep. So I've lived both. At times I was a great athlete. At times I was a bad athlete and not playing much. And I've been coach of the year. I've also been fired, not on my birthday like you, but I have been fired. I think all those kind of things play into what I'm doing now. I've had a couple pivots career-wise. I went from being a men's basketball coach to a women's basketball coach. And at the same time, I mean, that was a pretty big pivot in and of itself, but that was my first head coaching job. I moved from Indiana to Texas. So a total different culture shock, different gender, being a head coach for the first time. And then I also made a pivot.
You switched genders?
Did
I hear that right?
You did hear that right, but I switched genders that I was coaching. So
gotcha. Okay, yes. You can understand my confusion.
Yeah, I wanted to set that record straight and clear things up.
So it was a fun way for me to interrupt you because I had a real question. And here's the reason I asked this. I had a blast coaching my daughter's 8th grade rec and school basketball teams this past year.
Bless you.
Never coached girls before. Which did you prefer, the experience of coaching college men or college women's basketball, and why?
Well, I would have to say I enjoyed coaching women more because I coached them longer. I stuck with them more. I didn't go back to the men's game. So it wasn't like I had buyer's remorse. I went into the women's game and then was like, you know what, enough of this. I'm going back to the men's game. Now, just because I might have enjoyed it more and had success there doesn't mean I always made the right decisions.
Sure.
I definitely had a lot to learn, just like you and I have a lot to learn when we entered marriage, and
Yep.
still every day in marriage. But, I think back to that very first year of coaching women, and it's picture day. And when I say it's picture day, that means that's the day that the yearbook, that's the day that like the SI sports information director is going to come in and take pictures.
Yep.
Only the ladies on my team didn't know that. Only I knew that, and so practice gets done. And I'm like, all right, we're going to take the picture in about 5 minutes. About 5 minutes from now, we're going to go ahead and take that picture. And you would have thought that I said every bad word in the book about their mama or whatever. I mean, it was a mutiny. When I coach guys, simple. Hey, yeah. Guys, we're going to take a picture. All right, hurry up, coach. Hurry up. We got to get this done.
Yep.
It was not like that with at least my team of women.
It's an event, right?
It was. So I had to learn, and I was like, all right, tomorrow we'll have, the 2 hours of picture time, and then we'll have about 10 minutes of practice. And so I had to learn a lot of things when I coached women. Just like I had to learn a lot of things when I got married. You go through the premarital counseling with your pastor, and it's like, okay, you taught us all the deep stuff, but you didn't teach us any of the real stuff that actually matters. Like
don't leave your socks on the couch.
Yeah. Or, do you like the air conditioner on in the bedroom at night or not? Do you like the shades drawn a little bit so that light creeps in? Do you like a bigger pillow or smaller pillow? What do you like when you're driving in the car? The real issues that actually lead to real arguments, not the deep stuff, the theology and just the love stuff, that's not important.
Over here. The correct answer is I like for you to do all the driving while I sleep, honey. That's the way it works on any long trip with me. I do all the driving. She sleeps.
That's right. So I had to learn.
Yeah. So it's like culturally, it's very different. There are these gender differences. The thing I learned very quickly is how much the team matters and relationships matter more to women or girls than guys right out of the gates. Like with guys, it's like we don't have to get along, but if we start winning, then we'll get along. And with girls, they better get along really well first, then they will start winning. If they don't get along well first, they ain't ever going to win.
Yeah, and certainly
and it's complete opposites. Like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and I don't know that it's all that different in the workforce.
That's a great statement you just made there. I might make that into a book. Men are from
You
Mars,
should.
and women are from Venus.
It just sounds like it'd be a bestseller.
Sounds like it'd be good. But we're obviously painting with a broad brush because there are individuals making up this team, and they're not all the same. But in general, like I would be coaching men, let's say, or coaching women. And, after the game, I'm in a locker room and I'm like, we have just got to take care of the ball better. We can't turn this ball over. And I'm trying to be we. And here's this, Whitney over in the corner. She's like, I don't know why coach is pointing me out. I don't know why coach keeps bringing up my turnover. When I haven't brought up her turnover, she's just bringing that up. Because
chill out, Whitney.
Yeah, chill, Whitney. All right. But you do that in a guy's locker room. We got to take care of this ball better. We got to quit turning the ball over. And over there in the corner, Jalen's like, yeah, coach is right. Chris has got to take care of the ball better. Chris has got to not turn it over anymore.
Yeah, women internalize things way more.
Yeah, and the guys are like, it's not my fault. It's never my fault. Now, obviously, painting with a huge broad brush there.
Sure.
But, in general, it doesn't matter if you're on the team, you coaching your daughter's 8th grade team or you coaching your high-level lacrosse players back when
we're undefeated, by the way. I'm perhaps a far better 8th grade girls basketball coach than I ever was a college lacrosse coach. 2 seasons, rec and school, undefeated.
Books should be written about you.
I was the assistant, but still.
It doesn't matter.
Common denominator, baby. 2 different head coaches, 1 assistant.
Yeah.
Me.
You are.
This ain't just a hat rack up here, buddy.
Well, and that's why you're Coach Bru. I mean, that's why you are, who you are. And that's why you have millions of loyal listeners and subscribers. And you have a following that rivals very
talking
few.
About all 11 of you. But seriously, like it is such a different experience coaching men and women. We're joking around a little bit. It really is different. I think that extends, beyond the basketball court, and it's a lot of things. And if we take that approach where we're really in the relationship business, that changes things dramatically. So you went from,
but you're right, and even though we might say men and women are different in who we're coaching even, and that's true, they are. But even within that team, even within like the 15 young ladies that I would coach, each one of them, they might even be from the same background. They might even be roommates, but they have different personalities slightly. Absolutely. One of the first years of coaching, I put these 2 young ladies together. Okay, they're going to be roommates. They're 2 highly recruited. I recruited them quite a bit. One, I was really excited to get them. I thought that they were perfect for one another. Their like they seemed to mesh, or I thought that they would, they checked all these boxes. So let's put them together. Well, about 1 week, maybe a week and a half into the school year, I go and I'm like, Shannon, how is it? How is it rooming? And she's like, oh, it's terrible. I'm like, what do you mean it's terrible? She goes, she's so bossy. And I'm like, bossy? And this was my first year coaching women. I don't think in all the years of coaching men and playing with men on men's teams, my whole career, I don't think I ever heard the word bossy uttered one time. And here these 2 couldn't get along because they might have the same interests, but one was bossy, and probably the other one was bossy too. They just didn't get their way all the time. So even if they are all women, or even if they are all men, and they all come from the same background, they still have different personalities. They still have different agendas, or maybe it's the same agenda, but they, we want to get our way, and we can't get our way because someone else is getting in their way. So that makes us upset.
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes the same agenda is just a hidden agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other doesn't know. But you made the transition from coaching men to women. What was the next step for you?
Yeah, then I coached women both unsuccessfully and successfully for a little bit. And I actually became a head coach at age 27 and NCAA head coach at 27. And my goal was actually 32. That was kind of the goal that I'd written down, but I was able, fortunately, to do that well in advance. And so 4 years later,
did you feel that was a good thing? Because I was head coach, youngest Division I head coach in the country at age 26, and like that didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be a head coach. I thought I was ready. I quickly realized how unprepared, how grossly underprepared I was, and I feel like if maybe 5, 7, 8, 10 years later, that would have happened for me, I probably would have been better off.
You might have been better off, but I don't think that you're ever fully ready to be a head coach. It's like marriage. You're never fully ready to be a husband. You're just maybe more prepared than you would be at another time and place. The older you are, the more experience you might have, but you're not fully ready. And just because you have that experience doesn't mean that you're necessarily better off. We've all been around those seniors that are really just fourth year freshmen. So even if you've coached for 10 or 12 years, 15 years, doesn't mean that you've taken those experiences or you've prepared better. It's just a theory. But, I do appreciate how you one-upped me. I said I was 27 and then you had to throw in that you were 26. So I do appreciate that. I noticed that. And that's why you had the followership and the brand that you do, because you're big time.
I didn't want to say it, but I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But, I did feel like my hard work had been vindicated. I felt like, all right, I'm on the path that everything I was doing was working out.
Good.
And so I'm this head coach, 27. And then 4 years later, they allow me to go be a coach somewhere else.
That's code for something, folks.
I got resigned.
Yeah.
That's also code.
Not re-signed.
Yes.
Resigned. Yes, spelled same, totally different meaning.
Absolutely. I got resigned, which means they allowed me to resign before they would fire me. So I got resigned. I went and was an assistant coach, won a championship as an assistant coach, and 1 year later was a head coach again at the age of 31. And so I was 31 when I got my second head coach.
That happened to me too. I was 30.
You were 30. Well,
I'm just messing with you.
So if you're keeping track at home, I'm essentially twice as good as most people at achieving my goals, because I achieved my goal twice. I was a head coach twice before I was the age of 32. So I just shattered that goal. So I probably should write a book about achieving goals, because I do that well. But I coached for a while, women's basketball, and had a good deal of success doing that. And it was fun, enjoyed that. But I had this crazy idea that I wanted to be an athletic director. So I made the pivot to go be an athletic director. I actually went to a high school, 5th largest gym in the country for high schools, seated 7,000. No boys basketball program has won more state titles in Indiana than the school I went to. And so, 22 varsity programs. We had a big athletic program. They were way in debt. And
for people who don't know, Jamie, like if you have a basketball program in Texas, you're coaching basketball, you oversee it as an athletic director in Indiana, I should say, as an athletic director. It's kind of like basketball is to Indiana as football, high school football is to Texas.
Absolutely.
It's that same sort of Friday night lights vibe and feeling. And it's every small town in that little state, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's almost like they could make a movie about it.
You should do that. After you write Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, my idea, you do a movie about small town basketball in Indiana.
the Indiana basketball, they call themselves the Hoosiers. So maybe do something about Hoosiers.
That's perfect. Yep.
Yeah. So we
fifth largest, and you're
largest
the AD and coach, or just AD?
No, I'm just the AD.
Okay. You're the CEO of the fifth largest gym in the state.
I am
program.
But just to give your listeners there were 3 people in our school district that had 3-year contracts: the superintendent, the football coach, and the basketball coach, not the athletic director. So that was interesting. So but I got to be real good friends with the basketball coach, and it was a great experience there. But made that pivot out of coaching, went into being an AD. And then after a couple of years there, we'd done a lot of cool things, both with student leadership and with essentially getting them out of debt and getting them fiscally sound as a school or as an athletic department. Then I pivoted out of there and went into business full-time for myself and became a leadership consultant, and essentially just speak and work with people across the country.
What year did you do that?
2016.
Okay. And how's that transition been for you?
It's
we talk all the time offline, like we talked all the time about parallels, but I think people would love to know, what.
It's been great. But there was so much to learn. There was such a big learning curve. Like my first couple of years, I felt like I was a grad assistant again. I started off my career at Kent State University, Division I, men's basketball graduate assistant. And I felt like my first 2 years was being a GA of being an entrepreneur. Like the speaking part was relatively easy. Like getting up in front of thousands of people is relatively easy. Putting together a speech is relatively easy. Even writing a blog post or, the content part is fairly easy. The hard part is learning how to make it a business, is duplicating your salary, or your retirement, your investments, all that kind of stuff. Or, hey, if you're not working today, no one else is working for your business either, and getting sources of income and how to market yourself and all that. And I still haven't, I still haven't mastered it, certainly.
I think that's the challenge, not just in what we do, but any entrepreneur. Like I always say, you're really, okay, let's say you're an entrepreneur who owns, I don't know, let's say you own a beekeeping business, and you have a store like where you sell beekeeping supplies and things. That's not really the business you're in. You're a marketer first. You're a marketer of those products and that service and the store and what you teach, aspiring beekeepers. And then when the marketing is done and you've driven enough people through the doors, created enough demand, then you're in, quote, that business. And I think that's where a lot of people who do what we do, or even just business owners in general, struggle, is they don't realize the business we're really in. You're a marketer first, and then you're that other thing with whatever time you have left. And kind of the longer we do this, like you start out and probably 80% of your time is marketing, 20% is speaking and, selling books and that kind of thing, consulting. And then the longer you do this, the more it skews in the other direction. But I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, myself included, in the early stages as well.
Yeah. And, each of those subcategories, marketing, content creation, sales, and those are kind of the 3 main areas, but each of those is a full-time gig in and of itself. Yeah. And if you're neglecting one of them, then your business isn't as healthy. I mean, you can create the best content. You can have the best insights in the world. You could give people the secrets of life. Yeah. The booster, but you could have the secrets of life, that everybody's going to get rich. Everyone's going to be healthy. But if you don't market yourself, no one's going to know that. Or if you don't ask for the sale, well, then you might die with the secrets of life because you're starving to death, or, you're homeless because you're not making any money off of that. So each one of those things is difficult to achieve in and of itself, and then put them all together. And it's very difficult. And that was stuff that I didn't really understand and know when I first started off. And people ask me all the time, what would be my advice? And almost always the biggest thing I give them is don't quit your day job.
Yep.
Unless it's absolutely necessary. If you don't have to quit your day job right away, don't quit it until you have an exact plan for how you're going to duplicate your income, your retirement, and how you're going to move forward with your business, not
And
just financially.
Already have an audience. Yeah.
Yeah, do it as a side hustle. Like work that stuff for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Set aside all this money, this rainy day fund, for the downturns. Because like as a coach, I mean, as a coach, even the years I wasn't very good, my paycheck is still coming on Friday.
Oh yeah.
I'm still getting renewed most of the time. Hey, we'll give you another year. Or if I go on vacation for a week, maybe somebody else does the recruiting, or maybe it's in the off season and I can go a week without really doing my job. When you're an entrepreneur, no one else is doing it really.
Yep.
And so that's stuff that you have to put systems and processes in place. And that's stuff I didn't know. So in my first couple of years, we're going through our savings like that while I'm, essentially paying a learning tax. I'm paying tuition.
Oh yeah. Great way to put it. Learning tax.
Yeah. Well, Dave Ramsey, the financial guru, he talks about stupid tax. And I feel like I pay a stupid tax all the time with dumb things like, all these free trials that end up turning into,
Sure.
hundreds and $200 monthly bills because I forget I had the trial, but the stupid tax stuff, but learning tax. And so we have to learn as entrepreneurs, the business side of it as well. We all want to just talk and we all want to, create content, but we have to learn the business side or else we'll be back in a 9-to-5 pretty quick.
And a lot of people say, "Oh, I'd love to have your job. That sounds so fun and easy, and you get to, be your own boss and go on vacation as much as you want and when you want." Like, I was just talking with another podcast guest about this. Like, yeah, you'd love to have what you think is my job. You wouldn't love to have my reality. It might look good on the outside, on the surface, but there's a reason we don't keep a normal schedule, and we work early in the morning, late at night. We're tired. Sometimes we work weekends. They don't see that, they just see, the guy on the stage or, you signing their book or whatever it might be. And it looks real attractive on the outside. They don't have to.
Yeah.
They don't have to walk the walk.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of like type A personalities or high level thinkers or people that aren't afraid to work, they look at being an entrepreneur because I was the same way. They'll look at it as, well, I can do that because I've been working hard my whole life. I put in these long hours. I'm invested. It's not just a job. It's my life. So yeah, I can be an entrepreneur, but as hard of a worker I was as a college basketball coach, the reality is I didn't have to work as hard as I did sometimes. Like I was always working, but if I took time off, it would be okay. As an entrepreneur, I stress and I work more hours than I've ever done in my entire life because if I'm not doing it, it doesn't get done. Yep. And not only if I don't get it done today, do I not get paid today, but if I don't do it today, I don't get paid sometime in the future either. Like if you want to get paid a year from now, then you better be doing something now.
And if you trivial things like sleeping indoors and eating more than once a day,
if that matters to you,
and having your family sleep indoors and eat more than once a day, you better work your ass off.
Yeah. My son, it's crazy. He wants to eat SpaghettiOs and not just, pasta rings in a can. Yep. And he wants to wear Nikes and not just some knockoff brand from Walmart. And a crazy kid, I know, and he wants to live indoors. So in order to do that, then I better provide for him.
Yep.
And so I got to work my tail off. And I also have to work smart too, because, this goes back to this old book, or not real old, but the 4-Hour Work Week, and there's certainly some flaws. Started. Yeah, I know. But there's certainly some flaws to that, but there's also some good concepts in there. And one of the concepts Tim Ferriss had was, essentially if you knew you only had 2 hours to work today, let's say you have a heart condition or your health condition only allows you to work 2 hours today, or, whatever, what would you actually do today? If you absolutely had to get only one thing done today, what would you do? Well, when you're working a 9-to-5, and, people are forcing you to spend needless hours in an office. You
Yep.
don't think in terms of that. When you're a coach working 15-hour days, 16-hour days, but you're really elongating it. Like, you don't have to be there the whole time. You create stuff to fill that time. When you're
Yep.
an entrepreneur, every phone call you make, every hour that you're doing, every hour you're working, every task that you're doing has to have an end game. Like, that has to be a direct correlation to what you're trying to accomplish, or else you literally are wasting time.
Is this not a revenue producing activity?
Yeah. And if it's not a revenue, then it better be, you better see how it's going to produce revenue, or,
Yep.
You can't just take, and, podcast wise, like, it's easier for me to get a basketball coach or a football coach or an AD to come on my show if I ask them than it is to get some business person or an entrepreneur, because they understand the value of even if it's
Yep.
just 30 minutes, they understand that 30-minute time block.
Yeah, 30 minutes worth $5,000 to them.
Yeah, it might be because they're always comparing. All right, if I spend this amount of time doing this, I could have been doing this.
Yep.
And so that's stuff I didn't understand as a basketball coach, that I now understand as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's just a different animal any way you slice. I think that, if you're a grinder, you're a type A personality, high achiever, like you mentioned, and you're predisposed to that, it definitely helps you, especially in the early stages of being a business owner and entrepreneur, because you're not allergic to hard work and long hours.
Right.
You just need to make sure you're working smarter, not just harder.
Well, just yesterday, all right, I'm going out golfing. I love to golf. And I'm talking with the owner of this golf course that I really like. And we're talking about a seasonal membership. We're talking about
Yep.
getting a membership for the rest of the year. He's like, this is a great deal. We can prorate that. And I'm like, man, I want to do it. I have the money. I could do it. And then I'm like, okay, but is this going to do anything for me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, can I devote, like, to get my worth out of it, I would have to go golf more than I'm golfing now, but I would be able to golf whenever I want. But for those 2 to 4 hours that day, depending on how many holes I golf, what am I getting out of that? Now, if I'm going out with clients, that's a different story.
Yeah, the answer is depends who you're bringing with you.
Yes, but the reality, I have to then evaluate me and who I am and what I will use it for. It will be me going out by myself while my wife's at work.
Yeah.
I will go out and do that instead of doing stuff that makes money for our business. And even though that's something I want to do, I really want to do it and I can afford it, it's not something that I really can afford in the long term right now. Yeah, because my time, I'm not going to be filling that time. It's going to be needless time. It's like just sitting around watching Netflix.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, first of all, you're listening to Coach Bru podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Secondly, we're all in that story Jamy Bechler just described. Is how are you using your time? You're either wasting it, spending it, or investing it. Bringing a client or a potential client with you golfing like that, investment.
Yep.
Going by yourself is spending, borderline wasting. Not going at all after scratching a check for seasonal membership, definitely wasting it.
Right.
But, and we all have that thing. It might be like, belonging to the yacht club, golf, country club, tennis, whatever it might be. We all kind of have that thing. Like it could really serve us well if we're very intentional about how we use it and when we use it. Or, it could be our nemesis. Really, we would be our own worst enemy. That would just be the delivery mechanism by which we are our own worst enemy, right? So what'd you decide?
I decided against it. I'll probably go once a week as a diversion, as entertainment, and then I won't get much better. I'll be frustrated because I could be better if I played more, but then what would that get me in the long run? And so I'm all for entertainment, and I'm all for, even spending money on entertainment, on needless, mindless entertainment, as long as it has a place. But if that becomes something you're doing all the time, then you're really, unless you're retired or unless you're really wealthy and you don't need to really work on your business anymore, which most of us aren't, because most of us, our lifestyle, rises with our income. So we might be making a lot of money, just like pro athletes. We say all the time, well, they're stupid for wasting they're making millions a year, and how are they bankrupt? Well, because you're looking at it from your prism of, well, I only spend this amount of money on my, this is the house I would live in. Yeah, but you would rise, your lifestyle would rise. And so I have no problem with doing extra stuff, doing entertaining stuff, but you got to keep, it's what we would tell our athletes all the time, what you probably told your athletes when you were coaching, but what is most important to you should matter more than what you want now. That's discipline.
I said it a little differently, Jamie. I like to quote great philosophers from before my era.
Okay.
So I often would quote the great American philosopher Ice Cube.
Of course.
And I would tell my players, I tell my clients this now, you gotta check yourself before you wreck yourself. And that might be your rap lyrics, but there's so much truth to that statement, because it's about, like, I don't pretend to know like the deep hidden underlying meaning of a rap song, but in my mind, that's about self-awareness and knowing when, like you did with the golf club, the country club, know when to say no, knowing yourself well enough to know this would not serve me well, I'm not going to do it.
Well, most of us don't do that. And like, I think I have pretty good self-awareness, and Gary Vee will talk about self-awareness is a pretty important thing. But then again, if you think you're self-aware, then maybe you aren't really self-aware if you're delusional thinking that you're self-aware. But anyways,
and if you're him, dropping F-bombs with every single audience you're in front of reveals a level of a lack of self-awareness.
But he's keeping it real, though. He's keeping it real.
Yeah.
But I like to look at myself honestly, and I probably overthink things too much, and I probably look at way too many angles sometimes, but I want to know my strengths and weaknesses. It doesn't mean I always make the right decision, but I think I have a pretty good grasp on my strengths and weaknesses. I might not admit them publicly, but inside internally, I know a lot of stuff that is not good. I know that if I get a country club member or a golf club membership, I know that my thought process will be, I don't want to waste that money. So I'm going to go out and golf often, because I want to make sure that, number one, I'm getting better at golf, but number two, that I'm not letting that membership go to waste. And so that's me. I know that that's what I would do.
Yeah. For me, go ahead.
Oh, and so since I know that, and since I can be honest with myself, then I look at it and say, even though that'll be a great deal, it's not really a great deal, because what I want most in my life is not to break 80 every time I go out and golf. That's something that I would like to do, but that's not what I want most. What I want most is to be able to provide for my family in a way that we can take vacations where I'm not worried about my business at all for that week or 2 weeks, because the business, the process, the systems are in place. We have enough money coming in. I don't have to worry about missing 1 or 2 weeks. That's what I want most. In golf, a membership doesn't get me closer to that goal.
Well, you just described what's wrong with just about everybody in society today, who's not performing at a high level. They give up what they want most for what they want right now. And we've become an instant gratification society to a fault. And a lot of people would like to say that it's because of these devices. No, it's because of how you deploy them, how you use them. It's a smartphone. Most of the time, the person using it isn't. But like, we don't give up what we want right now, knowing we want to work towards what we want most. And it's a scary thing, because this instant on-demand society, we're creating a generation of people who don't understand delayed gratification, and as a result are lacking that self-awareness that we just spoke of. So it's definitely an interesting time. And
and when I work with teams, we'll go out, I'll work with teams. That's one of the biggest things that we're trying to get those teams to understand, is that it's a process. And I know that gets thrown out there a little bit too much sometimes, trust the process, or it's a journey, but it really is true in a way. Is how are you going about your day to day to ultimately reach the goal that you want to reach? And, with a sports team, you're going to have ups and downs throughout the season, but you're keeping your eyes on that goal of what's most important to you. How are we going about getting to that goal? And,
Yep.
I had a player once that, she told me in a end of the season evaluation meeting, Coach, next year, I just want to win a championship. That's my only goal. That's what I care about the most. And I said, well, you didn't care about that this year. She goes, well, yeah, I did. I said, really? She goes, yeah, that was, we just fell short, but that's the most important thing. I said, well, I know on 2 occasions you were at a party with teammates and they were doing drugs and you said nothing. And I know for a fact that went on. So your desire for a championship wasn't as important as your desire to be liked by your teammates and not cause any problems at that moment.
Yeah,
and that's kind of not exaggeration, but that's an extreme example. But we do that all the time. We want our comfort, our short-term comfort, or we don't want to ruffle feathers, or we don't want to call somebody out or talk to somebody about something, or we don't want to, I want to go to the beach all summer instead of, working out if I'm a soccer player or whoever you are, you're making choices now that are going to affect you later on, but you don't care about that right now.
Yeah, our choices often define us. And it's all these little ones, seemingly little ones in the moment, that when you stack them up, they define you. And I think you bring up a good point when it comes to leadership is you kind of have to be willing to be a jerk sometimes and call people out on their BS. And leaders aren't always liked. And she chose being liked by her friends and teammates on that occasion, as opposed to being a leader and making sure they weren't in that environment and they were making a better decision. And to do that, sometimes you got to be a jerk.
Yeah, and her, in that situation, her decisions and the way she was acting wasn't unusual. Like 99.9% of kids would do the same thing. They don't want to confront their teammates or their friends. So it's not just that she's unusual, but if you're going to publicly talk about, this is most important to me, well, then your actions are betraying your words.
Yeah, you better publicly walk about it.
Yeah. Now I agree with you that leaders are going to have to make tough decisions. Sometimes I don't, and I know you weren't saying totally that they have to be jerks, but sometimes
not all the time, but sometimes
sometimes it's going to appear that they're a jerk because they're giving you information or saying things that you don't want to hear.
Yep.
But it's stuff that you need to hear. One of my biggest things with where I think leadership fails in our society now is that we're not, you had mentioned earlier, relationships. We're not building enough relationship, or more specifically, we're not building connections with people enough.
We're too busy, right?
Yeah. We're not building those strong bonds. So when we do have to have that tough conversation, those difficult conversations, we don't have a strong bond or a strong connection already. And so it falls on deaf ears, or that's when we appear to be a jerk. But, you and I, you might be able to tell me something, on the phone when we talk offline that someone else couldn't tell me, because I know that, number one, you care about me. You don't have a crazy agenda, but number two, we have a connection, we have a bond. Yep. So you can talk to me a little bit differently than somebody else might. And so as a leader, if you're in a position of leadership, one of your goals should be to try to make a strong connection with as many people around you as possible, so that when inevitably those difficult conversations or situations arise, then there's some respect there that you can go to them and remind them of the standards or expectations.
So here's what I'd like to do for a minute for our listeners is, so let's pretend that the person listening to this right now is a coaching client of yours. And they just told you, here's the challenge I'm having. Like, I'm having a hard time, verbalizing or articulating, let's say my frustration with the decisions some of these people underneath me are making. Like the example of the player with her 2 friends at the party. Like, walk them through. You give them a little coaching on how they can navigate that situation better, successfully, what they should be doing leading up to that situation so that the message is actually well received.
Yeah. Two things right away is number one, this can't just be a one-off conversation. So this can't just be, all right, there's an issue with the people under me or the people around me or the people I'm in charge of. And so now all of a sudden I'm going to show them I care. It can't be a one-off type thing. It has to be a habit. It has to be a daily thing because they're not going to think in a one, like our tendency as people is to remember the positive things that we do. So it's, well, I remember that day I greeted them nicely when they came in the door, or remember when I did this or this or this. Like as a coach, I would always say bad players remember the good things they do. Good players remember the bad things they do. You know, I don't know how many times I'd have a player say, Coach, I don't know. Remember that time I blocked out? Remember that time I got that rebound? Well, the good players that do it all the time, they remember that one time they didn't block out and it cost their team a game.
Yep.
So, but we tend to take the side in our minds of, I remember when I was nice to this person. I remember all these times when I was good. Well, that person doesn't necessarily see all those times, or it doesn't register. And so the more you do it, if you're doing it,
and they hear it differently than you do.
They can, or maybe they didn't even hear it.
Yep. What'd you say?
Yeah, they might not even realize that you greeted them at the door, you held the door open, or you brought in donuts for them, or you sent them a card. Maybe their wife got the card when you sent it to the house.
You might think that's a big deal, and they might think, man, he's doing the bare minimum doing that.
Which is why you have to do it often. So first of all, you know, the old Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now. But
I thought Greta Thunberg said that. That's a Chinese proverb.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that's a Chinese proverb. It came.
Okay, I learned something today.
yeah, Chinese proverb. Yeah. Anyways,
but you are planting seeds, and you better be watering them, right?
Yeah, and so if you want to have, like, if I'm a boss or you're my coaching client and you want to have a better relationship or a difficult conversation with your employees, yes, starting now is better than never starting. But you don't start now so that you can solve today's problem. You start now so you can solve tomorrow's problem. And that's what most of us don't do as leaders is as much as we might have vision statements and these 5-year plans and stuff, we don't always think ahead about the people issues. All right, I know there's going to be a difficult conversation down the road, but I'm not preparing for that now. And so when we have this conversation, I'm not going to be any further ahead, and it's just going to come across as me being a jerk or me being in a position of leadership, the authority figure coming down on them. So first of all, hey, how are we connecting with people? How are we showing them that we care? How are we investing in their lives daily?
So how would you recommend someone do that?
Yeah.
Let's say it's someone in corporate America or a business owner listening to this right now. All right, Jamy, where do I start? What do I do? I like what you're saying. I get it, but I just don't know where to start. I want to, I just don't know.
This is going to sound really kind of hokey or old school, but almost have an index card or almost have, not like a big dossier or a big file like the CIA, but jot down a few notes about all your employees. If they mention something that they went to a concert or they mentioned that they have family, there you go. They went on a family vacation to Maine, because it's the way life should be.
Staycation land this summer.
There you go. So let's say that, I love lobster. We went to Maine, or, my family's in Bar Harbor, things like that. Don't just make a mental note of that. Just jot it down, because then that's something that you can commonly refer to as a basketball. You can do this it's
a scouting report.
Yes, you can do
this. You just
this.
Described. Yeah.
I did this with my wife, not at the start though. Which was really bad because our very first date, I took her to this really expensive seafood place to come to find out she hates seafood. That was a stupid tax, according to Dave Ramsey.
But you got really a second date. You got a second date.
I did. Then we went
something right.
Then we went to Arby's with coupons on our second date. Which
Charmer. My brother Charmer.
Hashtag fiscally responsible.
Yes.
Hey, this is who I am. You
There you
know, let's get this out of the way early on. I'm going to use coupons.
So
And
develop a scouting report on the person, know their
absolutely.
likes, dislikes, their family,
But
pets.
one thing we did as a coach, and you can do the same thing if you're a CEO, a manager, is every day of practice, let's say, there would be three players that I was going to talk to informally. They didn't know, hey, John, this is your day. Hey, lucky you, today's your day. I talk and connect with you. No, it just might be I come up to you. Hey man, what'd you think of Brady, in free agency going to the Buccaneers yesterday? Or, hey, you went to that Drake concert, or Drake dropped his 1 millionth album on iTunes. Did you download it yet? Just something quick, but you already know what you're going to say to them. And it might just be not a brush by, but it might just be when our players were just shooting free throws at the side or tying their shoelaces. It might be 1 or 2 minutes. Well, you do that with your employees, and all of a sudden you do that enough, they start to think that you actually do care about them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you don't want to make it weird. Yeah. Don't make it weird. Don't make it be very non-threatening.
Yep.
Don't get too personal, but just show that you care about what they care about. And so you develop your scouting report and you do that. John's going to be on Monday this week. Next week, he might be Tuesday. The week after, he might be on Wednesday. And you just figure out what you're going to say to him.
Yep.
And you do those informal settings. You also do individual meetings with your people. A lot of places do that, but a lot of places also don't do it.
And often they only do it because they have to, and that's
absolutely
not enough.
That's bad leadership. You don't wait till the end, or you don't wait till the annual review to give this laundry list of what you need to do better, what you didn't do well, all that kind of stuff. You need to be addressing that stuff, talking to that person, instead of evaluating, instead of critiquing, you're coaching. You want to be coaching people all year. You want to be helping them get better all year. If you're a coach, like a basketball coach, all year long, until they leave your program, you need to coach them up and make them better. And if they're an employee, as long as they're an employee.
The intersection, right? This is the intersection. Imagine how bad your results would be if you only coached your players individually once a year.
How many
bad
businesses
would they be?
Absolutely. And how many businesses know that they're going to fire this person at the end of the month, but they don't tell that person, then they fire them at the end of the month, and you just went through 3 weeks where you don't do anything with them. Well, you could have been maybe not training them up so they're better, so they don't get fired, but maybe training them up, so keep coaching them so that they make your culture better, or just ongoing meetings with people. They don't have to be long meetings. It could be 15 minutes at a time. It could be at a lunch break. It could be at whatever, but your culture of your organization, as great of a leader as you might be, with the emails you send out, the posters you put on the wall, what goes on in the water cooler, around the water cooler, what goes on in that break room is going to be more do more for your culture than anything else. And so, how are you talking with your people? And so I would encourage leaders listening to this, man, start by investing in the lives. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time, just a little bit, just show, but you start now. By next year, things are going to be so much different in your company. But most of us, what we do is a year from now, then we look back and say, man, I wish I had started last year.
Yep. Yeah. We're not putting those deposits in the old relationship bank account, so to speak. And
yeah.
And then when it comes time to make a withdrawal, you can't. Insufficient funds.
The last thing I would say about that, I mean, unless you obviously have other follow-up questions.
No, really, let's beat this horse to death. Let's not talk about anything else today.
Okay. I appreciate that permission.
Right. Last thing, go.
But when I will work with, whether it's sports teams or businesses, almost invariably the coach will say, fix the team, or the manager, supervisor, CEO will say, fix the employees, get them to be better, or whatever, however you want to say it. Because we as positional leaders look at it as, it's not my fault.
Yep.
And that might be true, but it is 100% your responsibility to try to find a solution. And oftentimes that responsibility leads to you evaluating yourself honestly, accurately, and maybe it wasn't my fault, but maybe I didn't do everything I could have to make this better. Maybe I didn't enhance or have a culture that allowed people to be empowered or allowed people to make decisions or whatever it is. So you have to look at yourself and say, it might not be your fault, but it still is your responsibility to make things better. And sometimes you're part of that solution as well.
And for people listening, you'd be amazed at how common that remark is that is made to us. As the consultant that comes in, the coach, the speaker, whatever, fix my team, fix my people, fix this player. And, similar to what you just said, Jamy, my response is like, here's the thing. If we fix you, most of the time, that player will fix himself. Because it really starts with the leader, as everything does. There's old sayings that are cliche. Sometimes they're crass, but they're true. Like a fish rots from the head down. Not a pleasant image, but incredibly true. Literally and figuratively, when you look at it like the team in the corporate sense, a company rots from the head down. A team rots from the head down. It starts with the head coach. It starts with the CEO or the owner, And I think when they fix themselves, a lot of those problems, the quote problem employee or problem player, that tends to fix itself. If we look internally for those answers. What's the biggest I guess hardship that you've experienced and had to navigate your way through? And the reason I love to ask this is there's no playbook for entrepreneurship. It's not something you major in college, at least not when we went to school. It's very much figure it out as you go. What's a hardship or challenge that you navigated that maybe you didn't think you could, or you way underestimated what was happening, but now that you've gone through it, you're really well equipped to help other people navigate something similar, like your clients, the teams you work with. And I know you work with a lot of high profile teams, NBA, college teams. What happened to you that you had to figure out, fix, navigate a hardship?
Yeah. Well, getting fired, getting resigned, I'm 31 years old. I was coach of the year. And we just weren't getting the job done, generally speaking, and, not thinking it was my fault, looking at the school didn't do this, or I didn't get these resources, or this happened, or that happened, essentially finding excuses, the same things that we tell our players not to look for. I was doing that. And for about one day, probably about 24 hours, I was pretty bitter when I got fired. But then a coaching mentor of mine essentially slapped me in the face, talked some sense into me, and essentially, for lack of a better phrase, said, you can be bitter or better. That's a cliche sort of, but it really is. You have two choices.
Also true. Yeah.
Yeah. Really, it comes down to, life is pretty nuanced most of the time in a lot of ways, but our choices are, we either do what's right or we don't do what's right.
It's pretty simple. It's not easy. Yeah. It's simple. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when it comes to our attitude, we're either going to have a can do or a can't do. We're either going to hold a grudge or, hey, what did I learn from this? What can I learn from this? And honestly, that has actually helped me in two major ways along the way. Is number one, I've been able to help other people, friends of mine that have gotten fired.
If you're in the coaching profession, there's two kinds of coaches. You've either been fired or you're about to be, and you just don't know it yet. It happens to everybody.
Yeah. Well, shoot, Dwayne Casey was coach of the year for the Toronto Raptors. I was working with the Raptors, doing some leadership stuff with them in the off season. That next year, he was coach of the year. They were the number one team in the Eastern Conference, and he gets fired after that year being coach of the year in the NBA. So it's going to happen at some point to almost everybody. But so I was able to help people going through it, friends of mine, but then I was also able to help a couple coaches when I was an AD who we had to let go for different circumstances. I helped navigate them through that process as well. But it's not just getting fired. Fired is just a specific situation, but failure. How do you fail forward? It's
a very public failure that's a blow to the ego. That's why it's kind of unique.
Yeah. But teams, I could be working with a really successful team. They're not going to lose their scholarship necessarily, or they're not going to get kicked off the team, but they're going to have losses. They're going to have tough, times. They might get benched once in a while. How do you handle adversity? How do you handle when things don't go your way? How do you fail forward? You're going to get knocked down sometimes. You can't control whether you get knocked down, but it definitely is your choice if you get back up again. And so how do you make the best of bad situations sometimes in life? And so that's not just, I mentioned getting fired, but it wasn't just getting fired for fired's sake. Like that's limiting to who I can help, but we're all going to go through adversity. We're all going to have tough times in something. And how do you react to that? Because the same way you react to a family member dying, the same way you react to getting, I know this is terrible to say the next thing, but getting stopped for a red light. Obviously those are two totally different things, or traffic jams, or getting fired, or a big loss. How you react to any of those are probably the same way you're going to react to all of them. Adversity, you're going to react the same to most adversities based upon who you are. And the habits you developed in your perspective and your mindset. And if you tend to be somebody that's a solution oriented, you're focused on solutions, then you're going to be focused on finding the positive.
Yeah.
If you're fixated on problems all the time, then you're probably going to look at only the negative. And so, that's something I've been able to help a lot of teams with, businesses with, is just that mindset, that perspective, and how do we find solutions? Yep.
Problem solving.
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah. I think it's critical, and as you're mentioning all this, like I wanted to downshift, talk about your podcast in closing here for a minute. Why is it called Success is a Choice?
Yeah, well, that pretty much goes back to a lot of what we just said. I am a big believer in personal responsibility. It doesn't mean that I always do everything I'm supposed to do. It doesn't mean I always make the right choices, but I do believe that most of life is about choices. And most of the time we can make good process choices, process decisions, good choices, and it'll lead to success or lead to failure if we make bad choices. I believe that. Now, that doesn't always mean if you make this choice, that's going to lead to you getting rich. It's going to lead to you being successful in your business or sport. It doesn't, because there are some external factors sometimes, but at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, we all have our definition of success. We might not have it, really, written out and put in a poster form on a wall, but we all know what our definition of success is. And some people, it's just as simple as, well, if I'm richer than my neighbor, I'm successful. My success was my definition of success kind of comes from the John Wooden, of it's peace of mind, essentially knowing that you did your best. I'm paraphrasing it, but self-satisfaction, knowing that you did the best that you were capable of doing. I see lots of teams that don't win a championship, but they were more successful than teams that maybe went far in the tournament because they had no talent and they all came together. They all were, focused on a common goal. Same way, there's some mom and pops businesses that are very successful because they're doing what they love to do. They're serving people, and they're making enough, to still give to charities or whatever. But no one would look at them as successful, because they're not Google or Microsoft or something like that.
Yeah, or just the local restaurant that's very successful and is a fabric of the community, but the chef there doesn't have like a Michelin rating or whatever the star rating is. But and I think that's something people lose sight of because they fall into the comparison trap. Like they don't realize you can do big things in small places, and many times that means more than being having any kind of element of celebrity.
Well, we look at, Teddy Roosevelt said comparison is the thief of all joy, and we do
he got that
all
from me. Yeah.
He did.
Yep.
I thought, I didn't think that could have been an original for him because he really hasn't done much in history.
Yeah. The man in the arena, that whole thing, he consulted with me on that too, but like, I just, you take credit for that.
Well, sometimes being a great leader is just knowing, you don't know it all, but you know where to go. And so
I got to give him a lot of credit for knowing
Teddy
where to go.
Roosevelt obviously, had you on speed dial, flipped open his phone and called up to Maine and found out, but absolutely. But comparison is the thief of all joy. And we do that all the time. We compare our reality to everyone else's Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter highlights.
Yep.
And that just doesn't make sense. You know, I mean,
no one's as beautiful as they look on Instagram. No one's as happy as they appear on Facebook, and no one's as smart as they act on Twitter.
No. And I fall into this trap all the time too. And I have to kind of snap myself out of it. You know, somebody else has a podcast guest that I wasn't able to get or something. And I'm like, oh, they're such a better person, or how did they get that person and not me? Or, you know, I see somebody, you know, they're speaking to this group. Well, I never got to speak to that group, or, you know, whatever it is. And unfortunately in social media, it's just one-upping each other after a while. You're just trying to one-up, but that hurts.
And
our
sometimes the
comparisons.
optics of it are very different than the reality of it. They're speaking for free. They're not getting paid. Like, do you really want that gig? No.
Yeah,
it
just
looks
do the
good.
best.
People don't know the optics, and you need to have your own internal scoreboard, right?
Yeah, but it's hard because I know that's going on and I still struggle with it.
Yep.
You know, and so, you know, it's just where, hey, let's sit down, or let's take a minute, let's take a breath, and let's just look at things logically. Let's look at things. All right, what is important to me? All right, success, you know, this is my goals. These are my goals. You know, I don't need to have a big mansion. You know, that's fine. What the house we live in, or this and that, that's fine. You know, Dave Ramsey talks about, you know, people buy things they don't need with money they don't have to essentially impress people they don't even like.
Yep.
You know, we tend to do that with the comparison game, but the success is a choice. I wanted to bring all these people together on the show. It's not a good business decision because we don't have, like, I think one week we had a pussycat doll and a pastor. You know, so we're all across the board on who we're bringing on the show. So it's not just one niche where that's what you're supposed to from a business model standpoint. So you develop this loyal target market audience, but we wanted to introduce coaches to business people, to entertainers, to, you know, authors, so that they all see that success leaves clues no matter what industry you're in.
Absolutely. People want to find out more about you, or they want to get copies of your fabulous books. Where do they go?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is just to follow me on Twitter at Coach Bechler, Bechler, at Coach Bechler. And they can find our websites on there and find our books from there as well. But it's coachbechler.com or at Coach Bechler on Twitter.
Awesome, Jamie. I love to close things out asking my guest one final question, and that being, what was the one question I forgot to ask you? This is where you get to kind of publicly shame me on my own podcast and browbeat me and critique me. What was the one question I didn't ask that I should have? Or what was the one like that you were expecting me to ask, and I dropped the ball and I didn't ask it?
Well, I thought you might ask me who is my favorite guest that I've ever had on Success is a Choice podcast.
So hang on. Who's your second favorite guest? I already knew that answer. Who's your second favorite guest you've ever had on Success is a Choice?
That
podcast.com.
Yeah, probably. I've been on the show twice now, where it's just been a solo effort. So that was probably my favorite one, where it was just me. No, but you know, I've had so many great guests. It's hard to pick.
Oh boy, here goes the coach answer. You know, all my players are important. Everyone contributed to the win. I had so many great assistants and staff members over the years. I couldn't possibly pick one.
No, I've had so many great guests, but two stand out, not necessarily because they're the most famous or the biggest celebrities, but I had Phil Hellmuth, the 15-time World Series of Poker champ. And he said something to the effect on our show of his wife doesn't realize how special she is. Something, I'm paraphrasing, but his wife doesn't realize how special she is because she's married to a guy that, even though models and superstars have thrown themselves at him, he's never cheated on her. And I thought that was a pretty interesting comment.
Wow. And
then I also had Kevin Harrington, who was on the first 5 seasons of Shark Tank.
Gotcha.
And the inventor of the infomercial. And what's obviously that was a really tough get. And that got canceled like 7 different times. And I was thinking that that's never going to happen. He's just being nice and blowing me off that way, you know, and it's never going to happen. And then finally, like the 8th time I called, and he actually answered. And he was on the way to his airport or the airport, and so he talked to me. So that was
So it's a tie for second.
Yeah, a tie for second, and then
Okay.
obviously my number one guest would be John Brubaker.
There you have it, folks.
Yep, John
There it
Brubaker.
is.
John Brubaker would probably epitomize success as a choice. If I designed a new logo, it would probably have his image on that logo. That's exactly right.
There you have it, and there it is, folks. You heard it straight from the horse's mouth. In all seriousness, I do want to encourage you to subscribe to Jamy's podcast. It's fabulous. You're going to love it. You had mentioned it's not a good business decision because it's not a niche. And I would push back on that, and I would say, you know what? Joe Rogan's podcast, he just got $100 million from Spotify. Ain't a niche. He has people from all different walks of life. And you have very, very similar to him, you have very dynamic, eclectic guests that everyone can learn from all walks of life. Not just me, but I think that it is a good business decision because, it's a great audience and you have, a knack for interviewing people and asking them uncommon questions that, you go on a lot of these podcasts and you see the same guests get asked the same questions over and over again. That's not success as a choice. You get unique people who view the world through a unique lens like Jamy does, and he asks them different questions and some hard-hitting ones, which is really what people want to hear. They want to hear the unvarnished truth. And that's why I love the podcast. Check it out. His books are awesome. I was just holding them up earlier. My two favorites are The Bus Trip and Building Champions A through Z. There's also the Leadership Playbook, which is fabulous. These are good gifts to give as graduation presents, high school or college. Doesn't matter if you're moving on to college or if you're leaving college, moving on to the real world. We've mentioned this a number of times. Success leaves clues, and there's such an intersection between education, athletics, and the business world. It's a great investment, and it's one that'll pay dividends if you pick up copies of his books. I know I have. I've got a stack of them sitting on my shelf up there that I pass out to people. When I find somebody like, you know what, this Jamy's book would be perfect for this person, this coach. So I'd encourage you to do the same. Check it out, jamybechler.com, successeschoicepodcast.com. Jamy, thanks for coming on, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Coach. It was fun to be on the Coach Bru Show. Thanks a lot for having me.
Always a pleasure.